Okay, my name is Jared Manning, and I'm going to talk today about distribution systems. I'm the assistant state engineer over field services, and one of my main jobs is to oversee distribution in the state. We've got 38 distribution systems in the state. Distribution systems come about because there's some sort of conflict between water users. And that means I've got a really fun job because it's all based on conflict. Actually, things tend to work pretty well because of these distributions that have been set up and the way that we have operated for years. The legislature has set this up to operate the way that it has. And I want to talk, first of all, just a little bit about the history, how we got to where we are, and then how it works. When the pioneers came in to the valley, of course, they started developing water, and then as the pioneers went out and settled all these other areas, that was the first thing they had to do was develop water. And distribution systems were set up early on. I've seen accounts from the early 1850s that talk about distribution systems where they had a water master that controlled the water. Early on, while Utah was a territory, there were cities and later counties, and these water masters operated under the authority of these cities and counties. Later, as we came into statehood, and conflicts were more common because of development and because we were stretching the resource. A lot of these conflicts went to district court, and for a while, commissioners were under the purview of the district courts. That changed in 1919 by statute, where they said it just makes a lot more sense to have water commissioners under the purview of the state engineer. So for almost the last 100 years or so, state engineer has been over water commissioners and distribution systems, but really the core of the distribution system hasn't changed much since the 1850s. There's 4 parts, and I'm going to go through each part individually. We got the water users. Those are the people who are in conflict. We got the distribution system committee. These are people that are elected by the water users to represent them to perform various tasks, and we'll talk about what those are. We got the water commissioner. I talked about the 38 systems. They all have a water commissioner. Two of the systems have co-commissioners, and then several of the systems also have deputy commissioners that are involved. So there's, I think, about 60 water commissioners and deputies total throughout the state. And then the state engineer. The state engineer is the one who's been statutorily charged with distributing water according to priority. That's, the first in time, first in right. And he's the one who has the power that he delegates to the water commissioner in order to do that. I want to talk about the responsibilities of each of the entities, each of those 4 parts of the distribution system. I wish I had more to say on this slide because it's such a beautiful picture. But I'll go right in and talk about the water users first. The water users got responsibilities, and this first one is, if all water users did this in the state, it would solve a lot of conflicts. And that is to have an adequate measuring device and controlling works. You gotta have a measuring device and head gate. And that's been a statutory requirement for well over 100 years. And a lot of times we get conflict and we can solve it by measuring the water and having some way to control it. If you don't have some way to control it, there's no way to turn it off or to turn it down. Whatever the case may be, when the water commissioner needs to regulate the water. So that's number one, and just if you don't remember anything else, remember that if you're a water user and you want to avoid conflict on your system, make sure you got a good measuring device and head gate. The other thing water user can do is elect their system committee representative. In some of our bigger systems, we have voting blocks, and like on the Sevier River, it's such a big system. The voting blocks are done by county, and the water users in one county will elect somebody to represent them on this committee. Some of the smaller systems, it's a little different. There may just be an irrigation company that is represented, and usually it's like the president or something of that irrigation company. And then the last bullet on here, water users need to, of course, pay an annual assessment. This assessment covers the cost of distribution. This includes the water commissioner's salary and any other costs, equipment, vehicle, cell phone, things that a commissioner needs in order to distribute the water. This is a different system than other states have. Some states have a commissioner that's paid out of the general fund. Utah's different. The commissioners are all paid by the water users, but the trade-off is the water users get to select the commissioner. And so I think in Utah there's less of an adversarial relationship between the water users and the commissioner because it's someone they select and pay rather than someone that's been imposed upon them. We talked here just a bit about the committees. I'll give you some more information about them. We have an annual distribution meeting every year for each of these systems. And the water users, the water committee, the commissioner and representatives from the state engineer's office come. The committee sets the annual budget, and then they set an assessment amount, how much they're gonna collect from the water users. And every 4 years, they select a new water commissioner. It's kind of like a president. The term goes every 4 years. And this year, when some of our water commissioners came up for re-election, we said, you just have to remember your term corresponds with Trump's term. And some people said, well, Trump's not going to last 4 years or whatever. I don't know what you're talking about. But it is a 4-year term, and the nice thing, like I said, is the committee members, they're the ones who go and do the interviews, and they select who they want. And as long as that person is a qualified person, then the state engineer will appoint them to be the commissioner. So let's talk about the commissioner. The commissioner is the main man, or as we have on some systems, we have a woman water commissioner. And the water commissioners, it's their job to distribute the water in accordance with the prior appropriation doctrine. Water distribution is easy in the spring when there's high water and everyone has enough water. As a matter of fact, the water commissioner doesn't have to do much except keep records. But as that snow melt goes away and water levels drop, he's got to start cutting people off, the people who have the later water rights. And he's got to do that into the season as the water gets low, and then maybe later in the season the water will come back up and he can put some more people back on. But that's what his job is. And on these small rural systems, he's actually going around, driving around in his truck, and he's turning the head gates and making the adjustments and making the records and so forth. Some of the bigger systems, it's too much to drive around and turn every head gate. It's more of contacting the folks and saying, hey, you need to turn down to whatever or turn off. And on a lot of those systems, it's nice because we've got telemetry, and so he can sit back from his computer and see what's going on with these diversions. So he keeps the records and then produces an annual report that is presented to the water users and to the state engineer at the annual meeting. And it shows all the diversions and stream flows and everything that happened during the year, as well as other information like what priority cuts he made and so forth. And then some commissioners do other duties that have been agreed upon between the commissioner and the water users. Maybe it's maintenance of a diversion structure, cleaning trash off or something, or fixing telemetry equipment, things like that. Because since the water commissioner's out doing the measurement and record keeping, sometimes it just makes a lot of sense for him to do some of the upkeep in order to keep the system running. Another thing the water commissioner will do, and I almost forgot, I got these tags in my pocket. Occasionally when people are having a hard time following directions from the water commissioner, he will tag he'll tag their diversion. This white one is kind of the nice tag. It just says you're not cut off necessarily, but this is where we set your gate. Don't move it. You know, sometimes the water commissioner will go set someone's gate, and then when he comes back, it's been moved. But you see that type of thing, that you might end up with a white tag that says stop doing that. This orange tag is a little scarier because it's orange, and it's kind of like, I don't know, the color of a school bus. No, I guess school bus is kind of yellow, but at any rate, this one is like, you're in trouble. You've done something wrong. You haven't paid your assessment. There's some enforcement action against you. And usually this comes with a closed, locked head gate. And so you see one of these, don't mess with it. And it has all these threats on the back, $5,000 a day if you tamper with this and so forth. Okay, state engineer responsibilities. Again, state engineer is the one who has the statutory authority to distribute water. He delegates those responsibilities to the water commissioner. But again, he doesn't select the water commissioner. He just appoints the water commissioner that the water users, through their representative committee, has recommended. State engineer also manages the water commissioner fund. We talk about the assessments that go out to the water users and the costs to make it happen. That's all managed here internally. The water commissioners are state employees, and so they get paid through state payroll like other state employees and so forth. We send out the assessment letters and collect the money and everything, and so that's done through our office. Also, we're responsible to train and direct the water commissioners in doing their job. Of course, as new ones come on, if we let the water users train them 100%, sometimes the water users will train them in the way that benefits them. And so while we do, of course, involve the water users in training, they're a big part of that. We are also there to train and direct them. And when conflicts arise, as they do, the water commissioner is usually pretty good at solving those, but sometimes they have to come up to a higher level, and the state engineer will need to issue a directive that says, all right, water commissioner, here's how we need to do it. And that way we can ensure that water is being distributed in accordance with the prior appropriation doctrine. Any questions about water distribution systems or any of those aspects that we've talked about? By the way, this is supposed to be a good year, so I'm hoping that, well, a good water year means my face smiles because I've got less people and less conflicts to deal with. So that's what I'm hoping for. Okay, thank you very much.